August 6, 2014. Members of the public wishing to address the Planning Commission on items appearing on the agenda are requested to complete a speaker's card and file it with the secretary, that's Sherry, prior to the start of the meeting. Cards are available in the lobby. Speakers should state their name and address for the record and limit your comments to 3 minutes or less. Comments must be directed to the commission, not the audience. While the Planning Commission is in session, all in attendance are expected to maintain order and decorum and to obey the orders of the chair. Could we have roll call, please?
Lajowski, Nolan, Chair Merck.
Here.
Vice Chair Foster.
Here.
Commissioners Jagiello. Here. Zabilla.
Here.
Nicklin.
Yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Isabella, could you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please? Thank you. First item on the agenda is public communications. This is a time set aside during the Planning Commission meeting for members of the public to address the Planning Commission on items of city business other than scheduled agenda items. Matters raised at this time may be briefly discussed by the Commission and will generally be referred to staff and or placed on a subsequent agenda. Under state law, other than for emergency items, no action can be taken at this meeting. And I have two speakers cards. And the first one is for Judy Murphy.
Good evening. My name is Judy Murphy, and I live at 218 Grand Avenue. It doesn't sound like it's on.
It's on.
It's on. Okay. I am speaking tonight on behalf of the Ojai Housing Committee, which seeks to create housing that people of modest means can afford. We believe that people who work in our schools, our stores, and for our city should be able to live inside the community. We would like to review a few facts that motivate our committee. The state's median rent rose more than 20% from 2000 to 2012, while median incomes fell 8%. State and federal funding for below market rate housing has plunged 79% over the last 5 years. More than half of California renters cannot reasonably afford their homes, using that 1/3 of your income rule. Ojai has lost population, jobs, and school populations. Young families have been forced out by high prices of rents and home prices. Our population has become older, and many homes sit vacant, being used as vacation homes. And house prices in Ventura County are again riding an escalator. The costs are increasing faster than workers' pay, meaning there's been no improvement in the problem of home affordability. Our committee recognizes the strong need for reasonably priced housing. We would like to see both homes for purchase and rental housing for people with moderate means in Ojai. Today we are addressing the rental units as we think we can have a larger impact in that arena. We would prefer to have the units built be 100% affordably priced for low and moderate income levels, to have on-site management, and to be destined for people who already live or work in Ojai. This will reduce the amount of commuting to and from our city and would provide our local businesses and schools with increased activity. We understand that this will require community outreach to ensure that local people are signed up prior to the development completion. We are following up tonight on an invitation made by Chairman Merck last year to the People's Self-Help Housing Corporation to provide an educational workshop on the development process and funding of affordable housing. We are asking you to schedule this in your future agenda section and to invite the City Council to a joint workshop in the very near future so that our political representatives, our staff, and the public will better understand how Ojai could offer reasonably priced housing to the people who live and work in our community. Thank you very much for your time tonight.
Sorry. Thank you very much.
You do have
We do have a copy, yes, we got one. Thank you. And Bill Miley.
Good evening, planning commissioners and staff. My name is Bill Miley. I live at 919 North Signal Street and have for a long time. As you probably are aware, I'm a member of the Housing Committee, a very active member of the Housing Committee, and I stand right behind Judy. No, I stand with Judy. That's not a good idea to stand behind you, okay? In our request to your planning commission. But I want to say, take a little different tact here, and I want to tell you a little something about what I learned when I was young, what I learned when I have been watching a certain actor's movies, and what I learned from my grandfather on my father's side, Pa, my grandfather Pa. And it all relates to doing what we're asking the city to do. So when I was young, I learned to always be prepared. When I watched Arnold Schwarzenegger's movies, I always was ready to take action. And my grandfather told me to always have the right tools. So tonight, I am visioning forward when we are building or have completed building these apartments so that people of middle income and less will be able to rent them without breaking their bank. So I have come prepared to start. And just in case you decided to do away with all this bureaucracy and start the build. So I got my hammer. I have some nails. I've got my saw. And my grandfather was a good painter. I'm ready to paint. And considering everything that happens, I brought this just to make sure that everything is going to be on the level. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bill. So, Mr. Wyrick, would you like to add to this discussion? As long as we're
I could not aspire to an encore to that, no.
All right, thank you. Anybody else that would like to speak on an unscheduled item? All right, we'll move along to the consent items. Thank you for your presentation, by the way. Wonderful. The consent calendar is approved by a roll call vote in one motion. Should any member of the commission wish to discuss or disapprove an item, it must be removed from the consent calendar, considered as a separate item. The one item we have is the minutes of the regular meeting of the Planning Commission, July 16th, 2014. Could we have a motion on this, please?
I'll make a motion.
All right, do we have a second? Chester seconds. Could we have a roll call, please?
Jagiello? Sabella? Sabella?
Yes.
Foster?
Yes.
Merck?
Yes.
Nicklin?
Yes.
Okay, next is disclosure of site visits and ex parte contacts. I would like to start off by saying I went by the 306 McKee site last night and met with Commissioner Jagiello there and had an extensive conversation about I don't know, it was a conversation. Chester talked a lot about the project. I tried to not say anything, so, but I'm very familiar with that site. And I have not been by the Libby site. So let me pass it to Commissioner Nicklin.
I'm going to recuse myself from items 2 and 3.
All right. Commissioner Foster?
Yes, this afternoon I went by the Libby Avenue site and also the McKee site.
Commissioner Zabala?
I also went to the McKee site and listened to Mr. Jagiello, as his role as the contractor on the job, listened to what he had to say. We didn't really have a conversation about it. And I also visited the Libby site.
Okay, and Commissioner Jagiello?
I got to recuse myself from, I think it's item 2. And the other 2 sites, I've been to the sites.
Okay, thank you. Next is the Municipal Advisory Council Planning Commission Liaison Report. Did they have a meeting?
Yes, there was a meeting Monday, July 21st. There were 2 main things on the agenda items. One was a review of a conditional use permit application for a new cell antenna on an existing Edison tower. Edison were there to present it. The CUP runs for 10 years. They were just adding to it, and it was unanimously voted in. And then there was a presentation done by the Green Coalition for extending the dark sky ordinance into the unincorporated areas of Ojai. And after much discussion, it was voted 3-1 in favor. That's it.
Thank you. I don't see anybody here from the MAC. We'll move on. Now we're going to the public hearing items, and item 2 is a variance VAR 14-01 to encroach into the side setback for a new garage located at 306 McKee Street. AP number 021001100. General plan land use designation of the property is low density residential. The zoning classification is single family residential, low density R01. Categorical exemption has been prepared pursuant to the California Environmental Quality Act. So I understand civil commissioners have to recuse themselves here. All right. We will let you know when we're done discussing this. So, can we hear from staff on this item, please?
You're going to have to continue the item because you no longer have a quorum.
Gee whiz. Well, that makes it real easy then, doesn't it? Do we have people here from the public that want to speak on this item? But we can't even take any testimony. Can't do anything. I'm sorry to say we're going to have to continue this because we don't have enough commissioners. This is item 2, the 306 McKee Street.
So you want to continue it to a date certain?
Well, I'll entertain a motion for that if we can do that.
Sure. Should we just plan the next meeting? I would think that, would that be the 20th? So I'll make a motion that we continue this item to our next meeting, August 20th.
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Nobody opposed? Nobody here to talk about it? Okay.
Chester's on to him. Yeah, he's staying for the other one. Yeah. No, he has to recuse. Oh. Yeah, but he didn't disclose that he spoke with
So we will move on with our newly reconstituted quorum. Waiting for Commissioner Nicklin to arrive. Lawrence, we're all done here.
I think he has to recuse himself from another one.
Oh, does he on the second one?
Yeah.
Where did he even come to? All right. We're going to move on to item 3. I don't know why you even bothered to come. Item number 3 is a conditional use permit CUP 1404, design review permit DRP 1408, and tree permit T 1411 for a second-story addition to a single-family residence with a request to reduce the number of required parking spaces at 810 Libby Avenue. Assessor's parcel number 02100111130. The general plan use designation of the property is low-density residential LR. The zoning classification of the property is single-family residential, low-density R01. A categorical exemption has been prepared pursuant to the California Environmental Quality Act. Could we hear from staff on this one, please?
Thank you. Good evening, Chair and members of the Planning Commission. The item before you is a request for a design review and conditional use permit to allow for a second-story addition onto an existing single-family residence, and to reduce, to waive the required covered parking for a property located at 810 Libby Avenue. The zoning for the property is low density, is R01, and the general plan designation is low density residential. The project site is nearly an acre. It's 39,977 square feet. It's currently built with a 1,300 square foot single family residence with a carport and storage area beneath the house. The applicant is requesting to add a second story of habitable space to an existing single-story home. And the space beneath the 1,300 square foot home is approximately 554 square feet. It's currently occupied by a carport and storage area. The applicant would like to build this out to a bedroom, lounge, and bathroom with exterior access to the single-family residence and no internal connection to the main dwelling unit. Because there's no interior access, the proposed additional living space would be defined as a guest house per the City of Ojai's municipal code, as living quarters having no kitchen facilities located within an accessory structure located on the same parcel with a primary dwelling unit. And this would be occupied for the sole use of the members of the resident family, temporary guests, or persons permanently employed on the premise. In order to build a second-story addition onto a single-family residence, the applicant requests a design review permit per section 10-2003. In order to convert garage carport space into habitable living space, the applicant must first show that they can meet the requirements of the parking for this particular use. And in order to meet that requirement, they would need to provide 2 off-street covered parking spaces. The original submittal by the applicant proposed a carport for 2 cars along the south side of the property. You'll see on your site plan, it was proposed between the side yard setback and the existing residence. And as shown on the site plan, the site slopes southeast, and at the proposed location of the carport, there is a 14% grade per the applicant's project description. And the city's building official reviewed those plans and determined that a retaining wall would be needed in order to place a parking pad in that location. The most ideal location for parking in terms of topography on the site would be a more flat area of the site behind or adjacent to the rear of the existing single-family residence. In addition, the proposed location of the carport is occupied with 6 coast live oak trees, and the project site, which is nearly an acre, has an existing lot coverage of 8% by the main residential dwelling unit. The remainder of the site could provide other opportunities for parking outside of any of the required setback areas. However, the applicant is requesting waiver of that covered parking area based on the slope of the site and the location of those coast live oak trees. So as I stated, the original submittal proposed the 2-car carport, but on the second submittal, a tree report was also submitted showing the health of those trees, and that placing a carport in that location probably wouldn't be a good idea. It would affect those trees. So they were asking to waive the required cover parking for those reasons. And waiver of enclosed parking can only be granted if the area devoted to the parking is visually screened from adjacent parcels. So they would still have to provide 2 off-street parking spaces, but they would need to be screened from the adjacent parcels. The applicant's proposing to provide those off-street parking spaces along the south side of the property between the side setback and the existing dwelling unit. It's basically the same area where the carport is proposed. So it would be underneath the 6 oak trees, and
It would be screened from the adjacent parcel to the south by a 6-foot wood fence that's currently there and vegetation. And it's also screened from the north parcel by the existing residence on site and vegetation. The proposed location of the parking area on site is considerably lower in elevation from Libby Avenue, providing a natural buffer and screen from the street. However, as stated earlier, the project site is nearly an acre in size and has a current lot coverage of 8%. So again, there are other opportunities for parking covered or uncovered on the project site, but the site is challenged with topography, mature trees, and required setback areas that limit the locations of such parking. As I stated, the applicant needs both approval of a conditional use permit, that's for approval of the guest house, which would be the converting the garage into, or the carport, I'm sorry, into the habitable space, and approval of a design review permit for the second-story addition and the waiver of the covered parking component. So that pretty much concludes staff's report. We noticed the public hearing. We have not received any comments from the public regarding this project. And staff is recommending approval of the design review permit and conditional use permit.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for staff?
I have a question about designating a guest house and calling something that's enclosed in the existing structure, you know, as opposed to an accessory structure. I mean, does that really fall within the bounds of an accessory structure?
Yeah, as defined in the city's code, a guest house can be either attached or detached.
Okay.
So they're okay with that.
Okay, thank you.
My understanding, just following up on that, is if there was direct access from that proposed guest house to the main house, then it would actually be considered part of the main house.
Right.
The fact that it's exterior access designates it as a guest house,
Yes,
correct?
that's correct.
So Heather, I have to say I'm a little confused by the plans. Are we looking at actually having them build the carport and have it like it shows on this first site plan? Or are we doing what it shows on the second site plan, which is no carport?
Okay, well, the applicant is requesting waiver of the carport or the covered parking. So I think that would be their first request. However, if they are required by the Planning Commission essentially to provide the covered parking, they can provide it in that location where they proposed it originally or in another location on site. And staff and the applicant were noting that this area would require, because of the grade, would require a retaining wall, and secondly, would require a tree permit to be underneath the 6 oak trees that are there. So I think their first request is, I'll let them speak, but I think their first request is to waive the covered parking requirement. And I guess if not, if the Planning Commission decides not to waive that the covered parking, then they would be proposing the carport in that location, unless
Okay.
the Planning Commission had ideas to provide it somewhere else on site.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions for staff? No. Could we hear from the applicant?
Hello, thanks for your time. I'm Paul Blackthorne. I live at 810 Libby Avenue. So, we have the model there. Will it help to clarify it?
That'd be very nice.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Do we have a nice clear view of this lovely
Yes.
model?
Mhm.
Okay. So, there's the house at the moment. This is obviously the top. This is what we're proposing to fill in beneath the house, the 570-something square feet, which would be bedroom, bathroom, and living room. At the moment, that area there is one carport, and then I presume at some point in the history of this house when they said everybody needs a second carport, what they did was just put a fairly rinky-dink sort of carport in front of the house there to probably accommodate that coning. So that's sort of right in the front there at the moment. We never really use any of these down here. We basically park the cars at the top of the driveway here because it's a bit counterintuitive to drive the cars down here and then walk back up to the house to access the front door here. But we understand the carport rules, so that's what we have to bear in mind in the original plans. So, so that we could have this guest house situation down here and obviously landscape all this area in front of it, make it all look lovely and part of the very natural sort of yard area, the oak trees and everything. We would obviously want to remove that carport areas down there. If we did have to have that, we would have it at the top here, where we kind of naturally park the cars anyway, where it makes more sense to. However, when we looked into that, we had all the tree reports, this is when we discovered everything with regard to basically the damage that would do to the trees. There's 6 live oaks up there, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 around here. The root systems could be very much damaged by building this sort of platform, the padding above them, and also you'd be encroaching on the canopy too, with then obviously the height of the carport. Also, from an aesthetic point of view, the neighbour who's right here currently sees nothing but lovely oak trees, would actually see would see the carport, which would actually be more visually apparent sort of for her. So what we'd like to do is say goodbye to that idea and just park our cars at the top here, and whatever the requirement might be for a gate to screen from the street, if that is a requirement, perfectly happy to do that. But basically, you can easily park 1, 2, 3, sort of 4 cars down here if required, well off the street, and then we could still do all the landscaping down here. It'd be lovely for the guest house, and still be off the street. And as I said, if we need a gate there to just cover seeing the cars, then happy to do that too. Does that make sense?
I'm getting used to it.
Okay.
Does anybody else have any questions about that?
Just that I noticed when I went to visit the site that that's where the car was parked, and it was very visible from the road. And so I think a gate would be something that would
We'd be perfectly happy
important.
to put a gate there. I mean, anything that would increase the privacy for the house anyway. So, perfectly happy to put a gate at any point in that would be required in any height. So, anything really that obviously a gate's not going to encroach upon root systems and canopy. So, perfectly happy to do that.
So we're calling this a guest house, but it doesn't really have any plumbing or kitchen facilities or anything like that. Is that
We'll have
correct?
the bathroom down there.
The bathroom.
It's basically bedroom, bathroom, living area there. So it's a 3 across there. And you see the back door of the house, or rather the side door already, it's around here. So the only access to the guest house downstairs is basically out the deck, down the slope here, and then in here. So that's the access. So it's very much, you can't access it inside. You have to go out the house, hence the guest house classification. But yeah, it's basically sort of a hotel suite, if you will. You know, it's just a bedroom, bathroom, and then a living area, and that would be it. Which would, as I say, go out all onto the lawn area that we'd landscape there. And my mother would be very, very happy about these lovely quarters when she comes to visit.
And so I guess my concern is, where would people staying there, would they park in your driveway as well?
Yeah, that would be the whole driveway area that we have on the side. Because it's quite flat. This bit area you see that's quite flat at the top here. And then you have the pretty much slope going down there. There's basically plenty of space there for 2 very reasonably parked cars, and then if you wish, then there's more on the slope going down.
Okay. Any other questions for you? Thank you. We're going to hear from the public, and then
Okay.
we'll
Thank you very
discuss things
much.
ourselves. So, thank you. I love your model. It's beautiful. Yeah. All right. This is a public hearing. Is there anyone that would like to speak on this subject? Yes, I have a card from Jim Churchill. So, come on up.
I'm the neighbor that wasn't mentioned. I'm the neighbor to the east. Hi. I should have visited or something. Is this, where's the east drive? Is Libby Drive?
Yeah, that's Libby at the top.
Libby
Yeah.
here. So I'm back here.
Yeah, you're the bottom of our yard, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And parking is here.
Yeah.
Okay, so, I should have come in and reviewed it.
No, no worries.
My concern would be if, my concern is, I think the carport issue is fine as far as I'm concerned. And my potential concern would be if we were approving another, I don't think this is so, but if we were approving something that could be an Airbnb kind of a rental unit. I presume that this is, the absence of a kitchen makes this an unlikely Airbnb rental kind of a thing. That would be my only concern. It's a concern that's been triggered by other things in the neighborhood. But I don't, otherwise, I don't think we have any objection to it. I think it's fine.
Right. So you don't mind if the cars are parked there without?
I don't mind about the cars, and I don't know what on earth the city is going to do about Airbnbs, but people are allowed to have second
I know.
units, so, you know,
Yeah.
second units.
That's a whole separate problem. Thank you, Mr. Churchill. Well, in a second, I just want to make sure, is there anybody else that wants to speak on this? Well, let's see.
If I may ask staff,
Yeah.
John, what's where are we with the VRBOs? I know that we're in the process of looking at it. What is our current policy? Yeah, or the lack of?
I think the current policy has been to not actively abate the units that are being rented via Airbnb or any of the other sites on the web. But I think that we all know that the council recently heard an item on that, and I believe that will be changing. It's just it's a dynamic issue. It's lots of cities are dealing with it, and it's a real problem because that comes up quite often with the projects we're doing. But for right now, I think they don't really know where they're going to be going with it. So I think it's something that is going to need a lot of study and follow through as far as how it affects the city, how it affects motels and the TOT we take in, and the context of the neighborhood and how it changes that dynamic in an R1 zone, those types of things.
Sure.
Heather has suggested, I just want to bring this up, that on the page 6 of 6, that she says the applicant shall sign a deed restriction eliminating the opportunity to rent the habitable guest house beneath the dwelling unit. It's meant for, I believe, family and friends and that type of thing. And, it's not a unit and it's not a hotel unit. So, it's really meant to be not something rented out as separate. It's just for guests and that type of thing. And so that's her recommendation, is that condition be placed on it.
Okay, thanks. So, Mr. Blackthorne, did you want to add something more? Yeah.
Yes, probably earlier when I referenced the idea of it being a lovely hotel room, that could have been construed in such a way. I'd just like to make an absolute point that privacy is a big part of my life, especially with the industry I'm in and such like. The last thing on earth I'll be doing is renting this out to members of the public to come by and say hi. This is my mother, our friends from England, family from the East Coast, such like that. So I understand your concerns entirely, Jim, but I will not be joining the Airbnb folks. So yeah, just to allay that concern.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
I have a question for the applicant.
You do. All right.
Are you opposed or willing to sign a deed restriction?
A
deed restriction
stating what?
that you won't. Staff is recommending you signing a deed restriction eliminating the opportunity to rent the habitable guest house.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Yeah, it's not my intention to do that. So I would be perfectly happy to do that. And maybe that could be would that be some kind of precedent to help with that whole issue as well? I don't know, that's another thought. But anyway, yes, I would be.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question about, can I ask?
Well, let's close the public hearing first so we can then have discussion about this. So,
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
I second that.
all in favor?
Aye.
Now we're officially discussing things.
So that deed restriction would run with the land?
Yes.
Okay. And, okay.
As in, when we do the deed restriction, it always has, most deed restrictions usually have a clause in them that they can come back and ask for it to be removed. I mean, say, for instance, the city embraced the whole Airbnb thing, and this is on this piece of property, and then it's somewhat restrictive to them and just them because rules have changed. They would just come back and ask for it to be removed, and we would say, oh, yeah, but at the point right now, what we're trying to do is make sure that a guest unit stays a guest unit in the house, and that the rules and regulations that we have today don't really reflect Airbnb. So, it's not a problem to have it taken off. I think, we would never want somebody to be penalized if things were to change.
I'm so sorry. Could I return?
Sure, come on up.
Sorry. Often in my industry, I get told to go live somewhere else for a long period of time. And if that ever was the case, and I was away for a year or even like 2 years or something, it would definitely enter my mind to rent out my property as a whole. Do you know what I'm saying? Because obviously financially that would make sense if I have to go and live somewhere else. I would be perfectly comfortable happily signing the deed that you're talking about in terms of the guest house, the VRBO situation and the rest of it, but I would be concerned that that would get in the way of me being able to rent out my whole property.
No.
If that was ever the case.
No, the point is if you're going to rent out the property, you'd be renting the entire property, like you said, and not to, more than one family at a time. So the deed restriction is so that you don't rent it out to more than one entity or more than one family at a time. So if you're going to rent out the entire property, you're fine.
So if I was going away for 3 months, 6 months, a year or something like that, I could still rent out the whole house. That wouldn't be an issue.
Right.
Okay. But in terms of my still living in the house, yes, I don't want the VRBO thing going on. Yeah. Sorry, I just wanted to clarify.
No, that should work fine.
If there's concern, staff was concerned about it being rented out as, becoming a second unit. It's not a unit, it doesn't have a kitchen in it. No. But if the commission so desired to change the deed restriction and just say that, eliminating the opportunity to rent the guest house for less than 30 days, 30 days is the legal parameter. Once you're over 30 days to a tenant, they become a tenant-landlord relationship and you have to evict them. The Airbnb is very specific that they break that landlord-tenant relationship, and that it's meant to be transient. That's why you pay, TOT. So, you could craft that or change that condition if there's some concerns, just to say, doesn't want to, eliminating the opportunity to rent the habitable space for less than 30 days. If that's where a concern,
So how would that be structured then? What would you call that document?
It'd still be a deed restriction, but we would say eliminating the opportunity to rent the habitable guest house beneath the dwelling unit for less than 30 days. Because that just really changes the whole dynamic of the type of relationship, and how renters' rights, and whether you're a motel or you're really a long-term rental. So if the concern is just Airbnb, then that would be what staff would recommend. If you're interested in not having it be a second unit, then we would probably want it the way it's worded now. I don't think he has a problem having a second unit. I think he's he's big enough, and the unit is. If at some point in time he wanted to convert it to a second unit from a guest house, and he wanted to add a little kitchenette in there, he's still under 640 square feet. He has a very large property, correct?
Right, except that the condition right now, as the condition states, has no kitchen facilities.
That's all I'm saying. So, so there's flexibility in how you could craft this condition. He's not in a situation where he couldn't somewhere down the line have a second unit. It's always open to this particular individual. It's just not designed that way right now.
Okay. And I think the way the conditions are written, if you wanted to rent out the house for a long period of time, that would be fine.
Okay.
Over 30 days.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, right. Mm-hmm. Okay, so that wouldn't be an issue then with regard to what you were referring to. Mm-hmm. Thank you for clarifying that.
Thank you.
I have a question for Kathleen. Is this for guest house? Not for you. For Kathleen.
For me. I'll go.
Sorry. Is this deed restriction pretty much standard policy with all guest house in Ojai, city of Ojai?
Yeah, Typically,
It's,
when we do
it's in the ordinance. It's part of the code
Okay.
as a requirement.
Okay. Any other discussion? Anybody have a problem with
No,
not
I
having
don't have a
carport
problem
there?
having a carport myself. I don't have a problem with not having the carport.
I think one consideration, that was brought up about the need for a gate out there. There is a restriction on the height of that gate. Yeah, I believe it's 3 feet, correct?
Right. Well, if they're within
the property line?
yeah. Well, if they're within the 40-foot setback, which is their front setback, they can only go up to 3 feet. If they, are behind that 40-foot setback, they can be up to 6 feet.
Okay.
So right now, the house does not meet the front yard setback, which I stated in the report that it's fine. It's legal non-conforming. But if they were to put a gate in, if they wanted a 6-foot gate, it would be basically at the line, the first line for the carport. That they move the carport behind the 40-foot setback. So the gate would have to be pretty much in that same area if you wanted it to be 6 feet high to.
Right. Recess it back from the property line to
Yeah.
to whatever
40
point
feet
makes
back.
sense, right?
Yeah.
But if it's within it's a 40-foot front yard setback there? Well,
But if it's
so if they went
within
20 feet, they would still have to go 3 feet.
3 feet.
But at that point, you're down the driveway, the elevation is
You're just
dropped,
looking right up at.
and you're losing it anyways.
Right.
So there's probably a happy medium in there somewhere.
And if it's about not looking at the cars, you're still seeing the cars in the carport. You're not, it doesn't
Right.
hide the car.
Down below, right.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to visualize this thing. As I walked that property today, I knocked on the door and nobody was there. But I did make myself at least walk down the driveway to get a feel for the slope there, and realized it was rapidly descended there, and didn't have much issue with the visual impact as it was explained by staff. I think that's fair, but Rosalie brings up a good point. I think if those cars were parked near the property line up front, and I'm kind of sensing that's where you're thinking of putting it, it might become part of a visual impact there.
Well,
where do you see those cars parked from the curb of your street there?
Well, it's flatter at the top, nearer the street, for sure. So that's the obvious place one would park 1 or even 2 cars. And in an ideal world, that would be the case, and you would have the gate, much closer to the street, so as to be able to accommodate that. But if for code that's not possible, then really whatever the closest is that the gate can be to the street, one would just park the cars behind that, whatever that was. But logically, it obviously makes sense that they're on the flatter bit at the top. And then, as I said, the gate from there to the street. But
now, was that driveway wide enough to accommodate 2 car widths? It was it was a single.
yeah, at the
It's a single
top, you can actually just get 2 cars in at the top. And you
Side
actually...
by side.
Yeah, you could, yeah. And you could actually... the driveway, the edge of the driveway to the next door fence, is it 10 foot that has to be? That is there
12, I think.
12 foot, yeah. Literally, if you just knocked a foot off that or something, you could easily get 2 in there. So 2 cars side by side could be very comfortably be put at the top on the flat bit, as it is at the moment. And then, yes, it would make sense to have the gate in front of them, but that's very close to the street. Is it possible to have the gate that close to the street?
Yeah, you can have a gate at the, near the front property line, but it would only be 3 feet in height. That's the maximum height allowed, because it's within the front setback.
Well, which I wouldn't have a problem with if that was okay with the city.
Yeah, it's fine. As long as you're under 3 feet,
Okay.
You just get a permit for it.
So you're saying we could have a 3-foot gate, but much closer to the street?
Yeah.
And that would be fine. Well, that would make sense, actually. Yeah.
And then it slopes down behind that, so.
Yeah. Yeah. So literally, how far away from the street line could that be? Because
It could be
On the property line.
really,
anywhere
and
up
that
to
could
the
just be a
property.
gate that opens forward, opens in, so to speak, or is it going to be
Wherever you
it's
want it
gonna
open, yeah.
be? Well, that would be terrific, because then that means the cars are going to park more naturally on the flat bit at the top. The gate's covered there. You're not going to see it 3 foot. They're small. I'm a small car person, so you're not even going to see them. If I'll ask this question while I'm standing here and have the opportunity, if you don't mind. that 12-foot distance between what's currently the edge of the driveway and the next door fence, if there was a foot or two required to really much more easily accommodate them side by side, would that be possible?
Sure.
It's basically just dirt there anyway that just slopes down.
That's, you can do whatever you want in there.
Okay.
It's not anything we would regulate at all, so.
Well, that would be terrific.
That would be the side setback area, so we'd have to reduce, right? We'd have to.
You can have a driveway in the side
It's not a
setback.
structure, right? It's,
Right.
Can you have
Side setback? No.
All right.
What's that?
Heather will let you know exactly what you.
Okay. It may not need any, I mean, literally all this is the dirt that sort of comes down to the driveway, and there's a couple of rocks there that sort of make this area just setback. But yeah, whatever would be required.
You know, my instinct tells me that it would be nice to recess that gate somewhat off the linear line of the street, whether it be a car depth or something. So when you're pulling off the road, you have to open up that gate. You can pull completely off the road, then open up the gate, have it swing towards your property, and not block traffic or create some sort of safety hazard while you park your car, get out, open your gate, and then enter it. So typically, it's nice to have that gate, the distance of a car depth, let's say 20 feet from the curb at the street. Well, and it seems that you have quite a bit of distance to the actually face of the house. I think it's almost, was it 26 feet or something?
It's 26.
26 feet. So enough space to pull off the road.
Yeah.
Open the gate and then enter.
Okay, we're definitely getting into the slope there, the incline, decline. But that's fine. I mean, that could still be the case. That would eliminate the idea of parking the two cars side by side at the top. You'd be getting more into a tandem situation on the drive.
Stacking it.
Which is not the end of the world. Side by side would obviously be kind of nicer, but I understand what you're saying. Even though that's obviously a very wide street and there's only one property, Glen Mews, the big 6 acres, 4 acre property that's opposite. So there's no other houses opposite. It's, it's a very quiet part of the street because there's only really 4 properties on that stretch. But if you wanted to do that, obviously to alleviate those concerns, I could understand, and that would be fine.
I think it's a safety issue more than anything.
No, I understand where you're coming from. Yeah, totally. Yeah.
And and we're still compromising. We're trying to find the middle ground with you, not having a carport and build the structure and all that. So I think
I can't
my
see.
estimation, it'd be a fair trade-off.
Yeah, I think we can work with that trade-off. That's I mean, I think speak to my lady, see what she thinks about it. I wish I could ask her now, but I won't. But that seems reasonable to me.
And it also, by being down back further, it lowers the visual a little bit, because if you had a pig, I don't know what kind of vehicle you drive, but they're going to be taller than 3 feet. And so by getting down the driveway a little bit, you're going to be down a little lower. So it helps in that regard as well.
You're still talking that could be a 3-foot gate, right?
Yeah, it'd still be 3 feet.
Yeah, because
I don't
everything's
have
dropping off down there, so a 6 foot would
you're
be
compensating
superfluous
with
anyway.
the rake of the driveway. The slope of the driveway.
That's fine. Yeah, I understand what you're saying.
Okay.
Brilliant.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I finally go and take my seat now and stay there.
Sit down. We have to vote on this.
Okay, thank you.
Do we have any more discussion, or can we entertain a motion on this? Chester, jump right in.
No, I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm still questioning the gate. Even the need of it doing what you want it to do, but
I don't think that needs to be part of our conditions or anything. I mean, that would
it
be
doesn't?
something that he could do or not do, depending on.
Oh, okay. I thought it was something.
I mean, if it's the motion of the planning commission to require a gate, I'm crafting a condition. I can read it to you while you guys are you can discuss.
Mm-hmm.
What he's asking is, isn't he required to screen parking that's in the front yard setback?
Screen from adjacent parcels.
Not
So,
from the street?
No.
Yeah. So the
So
gates,
it's not a requirement.
so it's kind of optional, so
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be part of our.
Right. So I would like to keep it optional for him.
Would you like to make a motion?
Yes, I would.
All right.
Heather, can you help me with this motion since you're writing it down? I would like to approve.
What you do is you adopt PC resolution.
I'd like to adopt PC resolution
Number 1407,
number 1407.
approving CUP 1404.
Where are you reading this?
It's right there,
It's at the very
Okay,
front.
just wanna,
You just read that part where it says subject.
where it says recommendation,
okay, got it. I'd like to adopt PC resolution number 1407,
07.
approving design review permit, DRP 14-08, and associated conditional use permit, subject to the findings and conditions of approval, which are the applicant shall sign a deed restriction and not be obligated to build a two-car garage, and not be obligated to build a gate, but that it be at your option.
All right. Do we have a second? I'll second it if no one else. Any further discussion?
I'm just curious why we spent time talking about a gate if it was optional.
I don't know. It just came up in conversation. It's shown on the plans.
Mm-hmm. It's shown on the plans?
On the site plan, it shows a gate there.
Okay.
But it's not something we have to require. So. Everybody?
I'll
ready?
second it.
You will?
Yeah.
All right, Rosalie's
Should
going
we
to second it.
change it to Zabilla for
Okay.
second?
All right.
Can we just have
Yeah, we can discuss.
discussion? So, in that scenario, that presented in the motion, just so I understand it, if there is no gate, then where is the limit, the boundary for moving the cars in or out? It doesn't exist, right? It's like from the property line towards the rear of the property at any point. So the car could be literally parked right at the property line. That's the understanding.
That's the way it is right now, right? That's existing.
Well, you mean that particular property, they have a garage down below, or
Oh,
a
yeah,
car
that's
park
right,
down
yeah.
below, and it seems like it goes down
true.
there. You know, it's one of those situations where there's a lot of gray. The fact that it's sloped, I think I personally like to see the cars move down the driveway slightly off the property line, front property line, just because it's architecturally, I think it just makes more sense to not emphasize vehicles as much as the structure of the house, that sort of thing. And that's my concern about it. So I just want to make that point.
So are you saying we should require a gate, or are you okay with that?
I would like to see a gate, yeah, I really would.
Or you have to talk to
But,
Chester and Rosalie, get them to modify
well,
their motion.
Well, we can vote on the motion, and if it passes, it, yeah.
All right?
Well, there's 4 of us, so it has to be unanimous.
Oh, it does have to be unanimous. Yeah, there's no.
I don't know that it does. It just has to be a majority of everybody that's here.
Yeah, right.
Is that right?
We have
Yeah,
a
that's
quorum,
fine.
but it just has to be a majority of us here.
Well, the applicant also seems like a very, conscientious, reasonable individual that's very proud of his home, and so when you have people like that, I would lend toward their sensitivity to do the right thing with their property.
Well,
And because it's sloped, I don't think it's gonna be as a visual problem.
Let me ask the applicant, where do you park your car now? Because there is no gate. When you park it in the driveway, how far are you pulling off the drive?
For obvious reasons of convenience, at that top bit.
You're leaving
sure.
it at the very top?
Yeah, but it is actually always a car length in. It's never right at the top on the street.
Yeah.
It's actually where the footpath to the house falls and everything. It's at
You're
least a car.
pulling it off.
Yeah,
into
it's not like it's up like this against the property line. It's most definitely, I would say, at least a car length into the driveway. But it is before the drop off. But it's just that sort of area there. It's just as it's dropping off. But I totally understand what you're saying in terms of with your concerns. But we would.
Are you opposed against doing a gate?
I'm not opposed to it.
Rather not, or?
I mean, I'd rather not, just because it's kind of one less thing to do, to be honest, along with the
Sure.
expenses of everything. But I, if I had to, I would do. But as things stand, I don't think we're causing much of a problem by having the cars at the top there. as they have been for the last 2 years that I've been there.
Well, I think if you're parking it where I visualize what you're saying, I agree with Chester. I think you're being conscientious about it, and it's really a matter of convenience that kind of drives
Yeah.
function that drives where you're placing the car now. It isn't right at the very top. You're sliding it down 20, sounds like 20 feet or so off the road there.
Yeah.
So I think I could live with that.
Yeah, and even when we have guests around, if ever there's a time, if you have a number of people around, there's a car does park on the street, to me it makes me feel peculiar. I don't want to see cars parked on the street up there, do you know what I mean? It's not something I'm happy with. So, we'll do all we can to get it off there.
All right.
So, for sure.
Staff would just like to clarify one thing, that the code does not allow required off-street parking in setbacks. So off-street parking would need to be outside of the setback areas, meaning the side and front setbacks. Where they park is a separate issue. I mean, we can't require them to park in the front yard or in the side setback, or allow for them to do that because they haven't applied for a variance to do that. However, we can require them to put in a gate and allow for that gate to be in the front yard area as long as it's no higher than 3 feet. And we would assume that the off-street parking would be behind that gate, essentially behind the 40-foot front yard setback and outside of that 12-foot side setback. But again, because they're asking to waive the garage and carport requirement, where they park is where they park. I don't think that anyone's going to be out there on site looking to see if they're 40 feet back from the front property line.
So technically, anything that's parked inside the setback is considered off-site parking? Parked within the front setback? Is that considered?
They're required to provide 2 off-street parking spaces.
Yeah.
But they can't provide those in the front setback area, which is that 40 feet setback from the front property line.
Okay.
Really? Wow.
Their driveway has to go at least 40 feet.
And I would just like to add one more thing. I know this comes up often with Planning Commission, but I would really like to remind everybody, it's a land use decision, not based on the applicant that you have before you. It's not a personality, it's really about land use. This gentleman may or may not own this property for the rest of his natural life, but you are making a land use decision that is affecting this property for the remainder of the time before, until someone else comes in and wants to do something else. So it's really a land use decision. You either like the way it's going to look with the gate or not without a gate, and not based on whether the person is going to do it or not going to do it. It really has to be a land use decision. And I just want to remind everybody that, because it really should be based on whomever is standing in front of you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Blackhorn.
Thank you.
So we have a motion. Are we ready to vote on it, or do we have more discussion? Let's take a roll call vote.
Jagiello?
Yes.
Isabella?
Yes.
Foster?
Yes.
Chair Merck?
Yes.
Motion
Good.
passes.
Thank you. Mr. Blackhorn, thank you. Enjoy. We will move on to it's not item, we're done with our public hearings. We're moving on to a discussion item, which is item 4, concept review CR 1402 for the remodel of the existing bookstore and addition of a meeting room and front pergola at 121 East Ojai Avenue.
So I must recuse myself at this point in time, as I'm the architect.
That's too bad, because it's a discussion item. You'd think that
You have to,
you could discuss it.
I believe I have to recuse myself
Probably
with the
do.
concept. Can I sit in the audience? I have to, all right.
Sit in the bad man's corner.
Right.
Darn.
All right, could we hear from staff on this, please?
Yes, this is the Heather Show tonight. So good evening, Chair and members of the Planning Commission. The concept review that's before you is for the remodel of the existing bookstore and addition of a meeting room and front pergola at 121 East Ojai Avenue. The general plan designation for the property is downtown commercial, and the zoning for the project site is commercial with an FAR, with a 1.5 FAR overlay. The existing land use is a 2,000 square foot project site. It's the current location of the twice sold Tales bookstore, which is approximately 950 square feet of office and bookstore, and adjacent to the Ojai Valley Library with a building separation of about 4 feet, and a secured pedestrian access between the two buildings. Historically, on the site, the current bookstore used to be the building that housed Van Dyke Travel, and the site was also known as the office of Mr. Edward Libby for the Arbolada Development Company. The current building was built around 1922. This property was included in a historic resource screening survey that was performed for the City of Ojai by the San Buenaventura Research Associates in March of 2011. The purpose of that survey was to create a database for the city to identify the need for the preparation of either a Phase 1 historic resources report in connection with the proposed alteration or demolition of potentially historic properties. This survey resulted in categorizing the site as needing a Phase 1 historic resources report. And so when this project, if it does come in for a formal application submittal, would need to also have a Phase 1 historic resources report with it to identify its historic nature. So as stated, the general commercial district is applied to areas with a range of uses from tourist serving retail and service land uses. They would include retail, personal services, hotels, and motels. So this proposed use of a bookstore would fit right in with those appropriate uses. The maximum floor area ratio for the commercial zone is 0.50, but with the additional overlay, it would have a 1.5 FAR. And that's typically applied to properties within the downtown commercial land use. So the applicant is proposing to remodel the existing bookstore and allow for more retail space, which includes an accessible bathroom, to bring the current building up to code, up to building standards, and repair the excessive settlement of the building. The plans proposed show an existing building of approximately 950 square feet, and there's a little discrepancy on the size of the building when measured versus what it stated it was, so that could be cleared up with their formal application. And the plans state that they are looking to demolish 820 square feet of that existing building, which is almost all of it, and retain 72 square feet. They would propose to add approximately 590 square feet back to the building, which consists of a meeting room area and attached storage spaces to house the proposed homework center, which is currently operating in the adjacent library and has since outgrown their space. The meeting room would be available to the public for meetings and presentations, and the total square footage of the proposed new building would be 1,563 square feet. Housed between the rear of the bookstore and the library is a patio area with access to both the library and the bookstore. There are a few existing benches and a chair and shed that will remain. The bookstore is proposing to add a permeable rain garden area to the east of the patio area with trees and shrubs, and to move the shed to the far southwest corner of the patio. An existing chain link fence separates the patio from the asphalt area directly behind the library, but there are no proposed actions for this area beyond the chain link fence. I've provided a table for you in the staff report which demonstrates the development standards of the zone, what's existing and what's proposed, and whether the project as proposed in this concept stage complies. There are several areas that it does comply with, which would be the side setback and the floor area ratio, as well as the height limit. But there are also some areas that it does not comply with the development standards of the C1 zone, and that would be the front yard setback, the rear setback, the front yard setback of 10 feet, the rear setback of 15 feet, the site coverage which the development standards allow for 50% site coverage. They're proposing 80%. And it also does not comply with the code in terms of parking. The parking required for this proposed type of use, because there is a public assembly area, the meeting room, they would need 1 space per 75 square feet of floor area. And then for the retail or bookstore portion, 1 space per 250 square feet of parking. And like I said, no parking is proposed with this project. So discussing the setbacks and site coverage, Article 8 of the city's code allows for projections into required setback areas for architectural features. However, this would not be an architectural feature. This would be building space. So therefore, in order to comply with the zoning regulations, the applicant would need to obtain approval of a variance from the Planning Commission. Typically, variances are pretty stringent in their requirements. The applicant would need to demonstrate that they meet the findings for a variance. And Planning Commission would have to make the finding that they this wouldn't be providing a special privilege to this property owner, and that property owners within the same vicinity and zone would be allowed the same advantage. Staff feels that the proposed addition of the pergola in the front setback area would be considered a rehabilitation of the building back to its prior historic front facade, and that with an accompanying application for a nomination of landmark status, that staff could potentially support the findings of a special circumstance within the findings for variance. Also, the proposed meeting room building addition that exceeds the required rear setback area is proposed to offer a space for a community need, which is the established homework center that has been successful in the adjacent library and has outgrown their space. So this is also an example of a special circumstance that exists that would meet the needs of the community, and again, staff would potentially be able to make those findings of support for a variance based on those 2 items. Submittal of a request for a landmark nomination of the building, and the fact that the meeting room is meeting a greater community need. I mentioned that their parking does not comply with the city's development standards for the zone, and this would make it an existing legal nonconforming use, which can be minimally expanded subject to the granting of a conditional use permit. Section or Article 14 would allow for a reduction in the number of parking spaces required by this article and can be allowed through the approval of a conditional use permit. The proposed or staff's proposed project entitlements for this project would require a design review permit, a conditional use permit for parking or reducing the required parking, variance for reduction in the setback areas front and rear, and the request for a landmark nomination in conjunction with the request for the variance. So staff is submitting the staff report, and the applicant is submitting their proposed concept review for the Planning Commission to provide comments and direction to the applicant on what they see as being submitted as a formal application.
Okay, thank you, Heather. Any questions for staff? Jump right in.
So I'm confused how we can be tearing down the building, demolishing the building, and still talking about landmark status. I mean, I think it is a wonderful community application, but is it the addition of the pergola that gives it landmark status if you're tearing the whole thing down?
They're not. I think there is a discrepancy. I noted in the discussion that there's a discrepancy in the calculations of, number one, the total square footage that's there right now and what they're proposing to demolish. Because like you said, it appears that they're demolishing the whole building, but that's not what it shows on the site plan or on the floor plan. So maybe the applicant can provide a little more information on that, because there was also a discrepancy in, when you measure the building as it exists and what the legend on the site plan shows, 2 different numbers. So obviously when they submit for a formal application, that would need to be consistent. But I think tonight the applicant is here and maybe can provide a little more information on that.
Any other question? Could we hear from the applicant?
Good evening. My name is Josh Griffin. I'm project manager at Cornerstone Architects, and I represent the board of the Ojai Valley Library Friends and Foundation for this project. They are the owners of the property. Members of the board are also in attendance, and they'll be available to answer any questions that I cannot. The origin of this project was a need for a separate meeting room to house the various programs that are currently happening at the library, especially the Homework Center, but also other programs, numerous programs at the library, book groups, writing groups, knitting clubs, lectures, children's programs. There's a ton of stuff that's happening at the library right now that will often impact what's happening at the library, just the normal day-to-day use of the library. So a separate meeting room was thought of as a place to house some of these programs. This new space would minimize the disruption in the library itself. The board of the Ojai Valley Library Friends and Foundation have previously commissioned and had approved a design for a new meeting room behind the library on library property. But cost estimates came in much higher than expected, mostly due to the fact that because it was on county property, the county construction would have to be involved, and something you entered into prevailing wage and all these other things. Not to mention the difficulty of having a board-funded building on county property. So the board realized it'd be much more cost-effective to remodel the existing bookstore, which is right adjacent to the library, on property they own, and which is in need of structural repairs anyway. So this new design incorporates a structural remodel of the existing bookstore, retaining the existing facade. And I think that's where the discrepancy comes in, is basically we will retain the front approximately 3 feet of the facade as is. Maybe some minor cosmetic, to the stucco or whatever, but basically that front 3 feet will remain as is, storefront, plaster, and then we'll remodel the entire back part of it, which is the part that's structurally unsound. We also add the addition of a new pergola at the front that would reflect the one that existed historically. And I did include in the package the pictures a picture from the original building that shows the existing pergola, and the rendering to see how we're proposing to try to match that. The meeting space addition would be at the rear of the building, and it would connect to the library, as staff mentioned, through a shared patio and garden space. The garden space would incorporate a rain garden element, as mentioned, to provide any drainage requirements for the new structure. And just so you know, this has been run by the county library and the local librarian for the city of Ojai, and everyone's happy with this new idea of revamping this garden area back there, which is used quite often, but is not in very good shape right now. So through the course of this construction, that space will become much more useful, not to mention providing further drainage for our new structure. The variance being requested is due to the small size of the lot and the desire to provide a larger, more usable space, both for the various library programs, but also for the numerous community organizations, such as a film festival, music festival, things like that, many other organizations locally that can use this space. The variance would allow encroachment over the front and rear setbacks, as well as increase the allowable site coverage. The front setback would facilitate the addition of this pergola to try to match the historical pergola. So obviously, we feel that that's a good use of the variance to match something historical, while the rear setback would maximize the meeting room addition, making that a more usable space for the library and the community. As for parking, any parking spots on site would be difficult due to the nature of the existing building. It's a really small lot. The entire face is already with buildings, so there's no access for any parking on site. However, for the library use, there should not be, or we don't foresee any additional parking because we're just moving the use from the library right next door. So most of it's kids walking from school and that type of thing. For public use, there may be some additional parking, but there are 3 parking lots within a 500-foot radius of public lots that could house parking for any community events there. And that's about it. So thanks for your time and appreciate any comments or questions.
Good. Do commissioners have any questions for the owner? I would like to, first of all, congratulate you on a beautiful solution and really thank the Library Friends and Foundation for not building the previous proposal. This looks like a much better solution. I'm very excited to see it. I think it's going to be fantastic. I'm really pleased to see you're going to restore that trellis in the front. My only comment on the columns probably need some entasis on them so that they look like the ones on the pergola out here. It's pretty minor. And I love the idea of those sawtooth things in the ceiling. That's going to be fantastic, I think. I'm kind of getting ahead of myself here. Any other questions? Anybody want?
No, I just also think it's an amazing community offering, and it's a wonderful project, and I'm satisfied that it sort of retains enough of the historic nature of the property to allow it to be, the variances to be granted on that basis.
Yeah, well, I can agree as well, but I just have a question for staff on these setback issues. How, I just need a bit of clarification how those are going to be dealt with. The, you know, the side setbacks, the rear setback.
Well, the only setbacks that they do not comply with would be the front and the rear, and that they would need to apply for a variance.
So we would grant that variance.
Well, I don't know. We would have to, the planning commission would have to make the findings, yes. But staff's suggestion is that, you know, with the submittal of a request for landmark nomination, and also with their proposed, you know, meeting room addition, which is serving a community need, those, you know, would help to make the findings for a variance.
That's all I needed to know.
I think also that, if I recall, the lot is really small, peculiarly small. And so setbacks are meant to have a relationship with the, you know, minimum required lot size. And this lot happens to be very small proportionally. So I think there's enough there that staff is saying, as Heather's saying, we're not saying we can approve it because we don't approve things, but we would be recommending, based on what she presented tonight, that we think we can make the findings for it.
Thank you.
This is kind of a concept review, so we're going to kind of go around and get people's opinions on things. Chester, you want to jump in?
There's not much more to say. I think it's a perfect use for that property, and yeah, it's a very unique situation. It's so narrow, and it's I mean, what do you do with it? And what you're proposing to do with it is just fantastic. The relationship with the library it's right there. So in some regards, it's all consistent with what's already there, and you're just bettering the whole situation. So I'm fully in support of it. Good job.
I think I already expressed myself. I'm a fan, so thank you for the design.
Lawrence, you want to jump in? Do you have any comment on that garden in the back there or anything like that?
Well, one thing I must say, I'm a great bookshop favorite, so I'm very happy to see that we're getting something that's going to be a little bit better, and Ojai needs a bookshop. So it's also, you know, nice to see that, you know, you think there's going to be a landscaped area at the back as well, where people can, you know, go out of the meeting area during breaks or whatever, and just have a place to talk yeah, I think just in general the whole design has actually been really well thought out, and so that's all I have to say, actually. Thank you.
I had one question about the parking for staff. Josh mentioned that there are meetings already going on in the library, and obviously they don't have parking for that. Are they saying that their parking spaces within 500 feet, and that's how they're able to get around that?
I believe he said 3 parking lots within 500.
Okay. Sir, would you like to speak? We'd love to get more feedback on this.
My name is Arthur Vander. I'm on the board of the Friends of the Library. Regard with the parking, I just wanted to let the board know that 3 years ago, when the original plan came up, the Planning Commission did approve the parking on the basis of the 500-foot
Yeah.
Parking lots.
Yeah, that really surprised me. They expect people to park behind Rains and then walk over to the parking lot. Apparently it's legal. Thank you. This is a concept review, so that's all we do here is just give you feedback on it, but I look forward to seeing the plans. Thank you. We're going to move on to next item on our agenda. And that is the director's report and director actions.
Okay, for this particular director's decision, there's 3, and they're relatively minor. It's a tree permit to remove a hazardous live oak, assign an address to a second unit, and another abandoned property registration. And then moving on after that to the active code enforcement listing, I don't think that there's anything on here that's really different than what we've seen just over the last couple of months, but I'd be happy to answer any questions if I can, if anybody has any specifics. I think there's nothing, I don't think there's much changes in it other than kind of the same typical type of activity we've been getting. And then lastly, we're just going to be talking about the upcoming meeting on the Planning Commission upcoming meetings. We are going to have a rather robust agenda for the 20th, considering that we just continued an item. Thank you, Sherry, by the way. And sorry I went ahead without you being here. I'm sorry, Steve. So we're looking specifically on the landscape ordinance regulations. How is that going, Commissioner Nicklin?
I think it's done. Just the guidelines, yeah.
Have you? Okay, so is that something that you're submitting into staff prior to the meeting?
Yes, Kathleen is just doing the final touches to it, and she's going to be submitting it, yes.
Is that something that we could move off into the first meeting in September if this agenda? I mean, we have 7 items. It's really up to the commissioners. I mean, staff is thinking that's going to be a really long night.
I don't see why not, if you
okay.
With that.
So we're talking about the continuation of the items for tonight, which is the McKee, the 607 signal for a new 2-story residence, and also an appeal of a director's decision on an over-large second unit. The applicant is appealing the director's decision to deny it based on it being oversized and not meeting the standards. And so those are probably going to be too controversial, those 2 for 607 North Signal. And then the modifying an original landscape plan is probably not too lengthy of discussion, but then we may or may not have it the skate park lighting ready to go. They're anxious to move that forward, but there is some submittal, and we have to take a look at it, and we have to evaluate it for CEQA because, you know, it's new lighting. So I'm not sure if that will be going or not. And then you have a concept review back on, is that right, Ojai Avenue? Okay, so it's 914, 1000, and 1010 Foothill. And so then we would just ask that you move the landscape, since that's sort of more city-sponsored, take the public's process applications first and maybe move that on, unless there's a real urgency to get that one done. But we're thinking maybe move that one onto the first meeting in September and just lighten the load a little bit so we don't, we have plenty of time to do the other applications. And I should clarify this by saying that we have not seen the guidelines yet. Staff hasn't seen them. So, you know, we need time to write the staff report and move them forward too. And so while they may be ready to go, staff still hasn't seen them. And it's already, I think, the 6th. And so we would have to have those. And so that's kind of what we present before you. So there's a consensus of the commission to go ahead and move the landscape ordinance onto the next meeting, September 3rd?
I think anything we can move would be great.
Assuming, what is it looking like for September 3rd as far as everyone being here? Did I ask this before that's around a holiday? Is anybody kind of the last?
That's after Labor Day.
It's after?
We're all home. Yeah.
Okay.
Labor Day's Monday.
All right, just want to make sure. All right. And is there any anticipated, anybody else being absent from August 20th?
I hope we have
All
a
right,
quorum
that
that
sounds
night.
good.
Yeah.
What?
Hope we have a quorum.
I hope so
It's
too.
embarrassing to not have a quorum.
It's just the circumstances, it's just
Kathleen,
unique.
I had a question while we're on this topic, not exactly that one, but do you know what the work they're doing at the Ojai Theater? I just came by there tonight and I'm like, oh my God, they're doing this huge amount of work there. Do you have any idea what
Need
they're
the
doing?
bracing and all that?
Yeah, what is that all
Well,
about?
you know, it was, they had that water main leak.
Yeah.
It undermined the foundation and so staff has been working with them. The city's building division's been out there and the engineering division. And so, you know, they've been doing all kinds of stuff out there. One, drying it out, evaluating the building. That particular wall, there, you know, at one point in time, there was, you know, some voids, you know, from when the water went through, and the water went through not in a straight pattern, but it came down and kind of curved around. So that wall was having issues. If you went past it, at one point, you could see the bow in it. It was actually bowing out, and so for safety reasons, and to leave so what you see on the outside also is occurring on the inside. It's actually being braced up, and they're doing the repairs. So it was pretty substantial what happened to the theater. But, you know, everyone's being very cautious and monitoring it on a pretty much, I think, a day-to-day basis. I've been inside it. It's kind of amazing how much damage water does. So, but yes, that bracing is all for safety issues and, you know, trying to take care of what was failing with that wall.
Great, thank you, appreciate that. Yes, sir.
Talked to Mr. Stewart today.
Oh, why don't you come up to the,
I happened to talk to Mr. Stewart today, and I would just add to what Kathleen just said. Mr. Stewart felt they were in danger of losing the wall. It was an emergency. It was, like you were saying, the bow, it was actually starting to hinge. And so I think Mr. Stewart and Rob Clark jumped on it and declared an emergency. And it was in danger of being lost. So it was pretty bad. I just wanted to emphasize a little bit more what Kathleen was saying.
thank you. Yeah, they're doing amazing work there, I just was curious. All right. Oh, good, even better. Thank you, Kathleen. And Planning Commission Subcommittee reports. We don't have Kathleen with us. Lawrence, do you know anything about anything other than?
No, there's nothing.
Okay. And our City Council liaison.
Good evening, fellow commissioners, staff. Things are going on in the city. I'd like to report that we're moving on with the neighborhood. We did an RFP. We approved of it as a council, so it's moving on, and Rob is just taking applications. And we started with the proposed fee schedule. So it's exciting that we'll be able to dive into it and see exactly how much we're charging and if it's going to be enough or not. So I Kathleen and all the department heads are really working hard to provide that to us. So we're working and see if we need to do any modifications. Last meeting, I'm trying to think about what else happened. The blow ordinance, there's a proposal for a complete ban on them. So it's going to pass it's going to come up for second read in September. What else? And coming up, and I don't know when the continuing of the fee schedule, because we didn't complete it all, and I couldn't find in our future agenda items. So just note that we're going to still be talking about that. And same thing with vacation rentals. We want to make sure that we are clear that we're reviewing that, and we still don't know if we're going to be open to them or not open to them. As you saw today in your meeting, there was a resident that was concerned that that guest house could be rented out. So it is a important issue that I think council is taking into consideration, and we want to make sure that we do make the right decision. And I think that's basically it. We're dealing with skateboard issues. We're going to be having a joint meeting with the Park and Recreation Commission about that, and the community is very concerned. And I don't know if you have any questions for me.
So I guess we're not going to get a biking park, right? That's been done away with by the school board.
Yes, that's my understanding of it. You're correct.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Thank you. Any other questions for? All right.
Thank you all.
Thank you,
I'll
sir.
just add on a little that
Yeah?
when you talked about neighborhood planning, I've already heard from 3 firms. We sent out the RFP, right? And so we do have some interest, just to let you guys know.
I believe that concludes all our business.